So, hello everybody. Good afternoon. I'm excited to have one of my former clients join me to talk about her own journey and the trauma that she experienced and the healing that she had. So, I'm excited she should be joining me here soon. There she is. Let's see. Let me get her added right now. She is here. You always get the funny just looking at me finding her. That's what it looks like for a second here. So let me get Christina on here. If it's gonna pull you up. There we are. There we are. Hopefully she'll be joining us here in a second. What a day. Hi,
Oh wow, is
Christina.
it dark? Hi. Does it show dark on your side?
Not really. Not too.
Oh.
It's maybe a little, but
Hmm.
not much. It's
Okay.
okay. We can
Because it
see
looks
you.
blurry on my side, which is so weird.
We
Hmm.
I we can see you.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, hi, Christina. It's good to
You
see
too.
you.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you to be here, and I just want to start by you kind of introducing yourself. And we talked about before. Obviously, when it comes to trauma in our lives, like there's some deeply personal stuff. Um, and so it always takes a level of vulnerability to open up about any of it. And so I want to thank you in advance for doing that. And obviously, whatever you feel comfortable, just sharing your own journey and why you were, looking for healing, what you were experiencing because of what you've gone through with life, and then, what you were struggling with and why you were looking for healing. So we'll start there.
So I'm gonna try not to cry. I probably will, but that's okay.
That's okay.
You know, it started when I was a little girl. And so sorry. You always think you're prepared for these things and then you're not. You know, my mom, told me my dad didn't want me when I was 4 years old. And at that point, when I was a little girl, I learned my worth. Sorry. And hearing that, is hard for a little girl because you think that your parents that, gave birth to you, your blood, that, they should love you unconditionally. And hearing that from my mom was, I mean, I'll never forget it. And it's so vivid. But then, um, going on, I went through life thinking my dad didn't want me. And then with that, my mom, turned into an alcoholic and an addict. And, you know, so basically I raised myself as a kid. I mean, it was a long story short, but I raised myself as a kid. I went to bed praying that I woke up every morning. I learned how to drive when I was 11. She would leave for like a month at a time with her boyfriends, and I was at the house. Thank God I grew up in Indiana because I'm so grateful that I actually was, where there's cornfields, there's really not much that we can get into trouble. So, and back then, we didn't have all the social media and stuff. So my heart goes out to these kids that are going through stuff now. But with that, that was when I learned my worth. We moved every 2 years. So I never had a group of friends I was always jealous of the friend groups because my mom would always get us kicked out of somewhere and we always had to move. So I had to do a lot of, I think God was preparing me for basically so that I could share everything with the world because I feel so comfortable now, with people. But it was hard because you have to, I grew up ashamed and I grew up, not feeling loved. And my mom, would be in a bar and I would watch, I was in third grade. I remember I would watch the clock to see it was like 8:30. And if she wasn't coming home, I had to run in the alley and go to one of my friends' houses. I didn't really care for the girls, but the mom would always let me stay the night. And so I had to, I would ask her humbly. And yeah, so it was really, that's really the kind of the short end of it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that goes into that, but that's your core, right? So my core roots were I'm not worthy. My core roots were I don't matter. Um, the people that were supposed to love me didn't protect me. Um, and so that's really kind of what that was all about. It was, my mom didn't go to my graduation, but then going through that, you go through life and you're just angry. And of course, we create so many illnesses, right? And my mom was a hypochondriac, and I don't now, knowing what she went through and actually forgiving her and learning what she had to, why she was the way she was. I think that I'm able to have empathy now for her, but she, to me, when I was younger, she was always a hypochondriac. Like there was always something wrong. And so for me, I learned, one, because nobody was there to take care of me, but I learned to like just handle it. And so I've almost disassociated myself with pain. Like I have such a high tolerance for pain. And so, which is not necessarily good, because I'm learning now to get in tune with my body, because you just are like, nope, got to keep going. I mean, I have one leg and I'm just going to keep going. So you learn to honor your body, going through all this stuff I, have learned, and every weird modality that I've tried, to heal. They've weird, but they've been awesome, because they're always experiences. But that's kind of the short end of it. And then, I always believe, I think at a very young age, I'm grateful that God had a hand on me, because I can't explain it. Like I really should be like a really hot mess, but I can't explain that other than God. My grandma, when I was she wasn't even my real grandma. She was like my step grandma. My grandpa lived through like 3 wives, but I was the only one that called her grandma, and she would take me to church. And so I remember when I was a part of like a play, and I was the angel, and that was when I remember vividly thinking, wow, I matter, because I was part of all of that. So then I just had this deep yearning, like I can't explain it, but it was really always that I knew that God would lead me somewhere, even though I was petrified all the time. But I remember, it was probably, I don't know, my husband and I had just gotten married, and I had a clothing line back then, and I always give business back, and we went to the spa because they carried my clothing line, and I got a woman that looked at me in the face and said, "I'd like to open your heart to forgiving your mom." And I was not ready to do. I was like, "What?" I no way. Like honestly, F you. I no way. I'm out. Like I don't. You have no idea what that lady did to me. But then I also know that God, God placed her. How did she know that about me, right? Like, so then I thought, all right, I'll go let her give me a massage. Let's see. And then she said, your parents had you, but then God took you. You're God's child. And at that moment, it was very pivotal for me, because that was when I was able to go, okay, I think I can do this. I think I can, and that was what opened me up to forgiving my mom, and it was a long road. My husband put, my mom into halfway houses, it was really, she tried to take her life a couple of times, and then she eventually did. But, my husband had to really just kind of go in there and clean it up for her and help her, because I couldn't, because at that point I was still really, really hurt. And so I understand what trauma does to, it was weird. You don't really realize it until you're in it, where you're like crawling in your skin, and you don't even know why. Like my mom would say she's coming over. Of course she would not show up, and I would, spin out. My husband would have to be like, he wore the heads of both my mom and my dad. And I think that a lot of people need to know that, like, we have to look in our own backyard, because sometimes we look at our spouses or people, and we react to them of how the people in our life as children treated us. Sure. And until that, until that's healed, you can't really, everybody's wearing the head.
Yeah. Past pain will always influence future pain, right? It will always be projected, and definitely in our closest relationships.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. So you tried, I know, a lot of things, right? You might have close to the record of my clients.
We could do a list. I could probably give you a list, and we could see, because I've gone so far to asking my doctor for oxytocin. So yeah, I've done surrender treatments. I did a holographic trauma experience. Like I've done all kinds of weird stuff. But even every time we go out of town, I still do weird stuff like that, because I think it's fascinating.
Sure. No, the bottom line, you were wanting to heal. And one thing that we talk about a lot is it's one thing to consciously know, I need to forgive my mom, or I need to forgive that person or that trauma. It's a whole other thing for your nervous system, your body, to actually truly let that go and accept that, like, it's safe to forgive. And I think that's where most people, you get stuck, right? You're aware this is hurting you, and counseling and some other things gives you that type of awareness, but then now it's almost worse because you're so aware
Yes.
of how much your experiences have impacted you and traumatized you, but then you're helpless to your brain and nervous system and your body actually really accepting and letting that go.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really, I had taken a friend down to rehab, and I, at or not Maryville, but Sierra Tucson, and I went down for Friends and Family Week, and I stayed, and I was the only one in there that didn't have any happy memories of my parents, with all of these other people with addiction. And at that point, I was like, holy crap, like, this is a little, this is not what I came here for. I was like, I just couldn't believe that I was the only one when they were, we're, none of us are, I'm no better than anybody else, but I was just really kind of shocked that that's really what that was. And it really, again, it's exactly like what you said, once you go through life. I remember telling like an instructor, like, to shut up, like, like, who talks like that? But because I was so like, in my own trauma, that I wasn't going to put up with anybody. And it's so bad because I love her dearly and we laugh about it now, but I was like, who tells an instructor to shut up? Like, who was I?
Trauma, right?
Yeah, right.
The trauma brain, can do whatever it feels it needs to protect itself, right? And that can be in aggression, in fighting back, or that can be in total shutdown, in depression and isolation, or that can be in constant fight, which is, anxiety and worry and perfectionism and needing to control things, right? There's no one way that your brain will try to protect you from future pain that is, similar to past.
Right. Yeah, no, it's
So
kind of crazy.
it is. It is. And it's so unique to the individual. So I know too, besides you literally trying like all healing modalities, I know you also went down the traditional route, right? With therapy and EMDR and, other things that, again, we have nothing negative to say about anything. And I never have. Everything has its, place and its benefit. But I know when you came to me, you had so much awareness and knowledge and could connect all the pieces of, what that experience growing up with your parents had done and how it had hurt you, but you weren't able to get free of it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's, the EMDR, it was awesome. She got me to the point, and I also think somebody talking with you and, and going to therapy all the time was great because it really helped me get through what I needed to get through instead of, but, honestly, learning the science behind it, your course really, I was blown away. Like I was, because that's how I learn. That's how I run my practice. Like I'm such a geek on knowing, like, I just need to know, like, why does that do that? And knowing when you do the EMDR, knowing what you went through and you're doing this stuff and you're not feeling, I mean, you're feeling better, but you're not, because you're reliving it. And you're not really able to, you're able to a little bit, you are. I mean, EMDR does work, but you're still aware of it. And for me, I have to have the pieces, like the pieces have to go together for me to go, oh, that makes sense. And then I logically can let it go. That really was, I mean, I honestly, like, I tell people about your course all the time because I think that I'm free. Like, I'm free of not, like, I don't hold on to stuff. Like, people don't offend me as much. Like, I can't believe how much I would go into the world and I was so offended. Like they don't care. Like, in their reality, like, I tell my daughter, I'm like, they're too worried about themselves. They're not worried about you. Like, don't worry about it. But it's so bizarre. And we live in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we're like, it's like pretty people everywhere and everybody's fit. And it just is what it is. I love where we live, but there's so much comparison, and I'm in the public eye all the time. I'm grateful and blessed for that. But you also are like, okay, you got to be put together and not get offended by people or somebody, because they're working usually out of their own trauma.
Right. Well, if you have a deep belief system of not being worthy or lovable or wanted, then the brain is constantly seeking that outside, right? Because you don't have it inside. And then therefore, it's constantly looking for other evidence of not being wanted or accepted or liked. And it's doing that to validate that story, because that's how the brain works subconsciously. Nobody is going out in their life and like, I'm going to go out today and to this event or to the store and find evidence that I'm unlovable, right? Nobody is consciously saying that, but that's how the brain works, right? And that's where we don't understand that until we truly do understand that's what the brain is doing based upon how our life impacted us, the belief systems that came from it. It's going to continue to validate it. And it will even project it onto situations where it's not. And definitely, you know, in relationships, because the brain has to validate it. And to your point of it, it's just the whole pieces together. But the more you understand how the brain works, I think one of the greatest gifts in that is the more it actually allows you to separate from it versus it all being glued together. Like, this is me, this is how I think, this is who I am. And when you're like, okay, this has impacted me, but this is the brain doing its job based upon my life, my trauma, my experiences. And now that starts to give me this space, right, to separate from it. And that beautiful space, you know, and we go through obviously what to do in that space, but that allows you to actually start to heal through it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, because it's really because you carry that like with a bunch of baggage, like you're just carrying it around with you, and yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, I'm just able to disconnect, and it really, the whole program, the whole course was just, I was in awe all the time, because it was really just, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I could believe it, but I was like, I can't even believe it. Like, how could I not know that? Like, you know, you're just kind of. It was really, and what's been so awesome is that I'm able to now, but you know, God just has them show up. I'm in a contract or whatever, anybody shows up. I always tell my husband, you know, people always say, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And I'm like, I do. I know why you're telling me this. It's happened my whole life. And my husband's like, yeah, does that surprise you? Like, I mean, the most random stuff, you know, but it's really, it helps me to know also that God knew what he was doing with me as a child, right? And for my daughter, and listen, it can be anybody. I'm not saying that everybody has to, you know, believe in what I believe in or to heal. You know, for me, that was all I had, right? So all I had was God. I didn't have parents that really, you know, they didn't care. So all I had was to rely on, you know, God. So whatever it is, you know, for people, you know, they find them. And so I don't want anybody to think that I'm on here going, you just have to believe in God and it'll work. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and to that point, right? You did your whole life. And not that doesn't absolutely serve its place, or just belief in something greater than ourselves is pivotal, right? To even trying to make sense of all the challenges that are life and how it is fair. And it's not, right? It's not, but how some people are born in horrible parental situations, others, you know, intense physical challenges as I've lived through, right? Or other traumas or things. There's so much suffering that is never right, is never good, right? And we all have different ones. And it is a belief in something bigger that often allows people to survive. But the point is then often we don't realize how much that situation impacted us, altered our brain and nervous system, altered, no matter how tough, resilient, faithful, you know, and I was a fighter, it's hard to almost sit in the truth of like, okay, so I went through that, but now, wow, that really impacted me, right? In a way that I had to survive that, but now I've got to figure out how to truly like heal and let go of what it left with me, right? Which we do through compassion and grace, because we're going to be impacted by these significant, you know, childhoods or other challenges that we navigate through. And sometimes I know for myself, that was hard to like, after surviving so much, to be really aware of like, wow, that really, really altered me. you
Yeah.
know, to a way in which now I've got to deal with to truly get free of the hurt and the wounds and the trauma. And sometimes that's a hard thing to sit with, right? Because you
Yeah.
want to just move on,
Yes.
right? So you just want, you don't
Yeah.
want to stay like, oh, and I know that was for you. Like you didn't want to be defined by your challenging childhood, but it was still defining
For sure.
how you felt in your life and
Oh,
how you navigate it.
well, I may look good on the, not saying that, but I mean, I look like I'm put together on the outside, and inside I'm like, oh, you're just, it's bizarre. And you're exactly right. Also, you go through all of that. It's almost like, right after the storm comes everything. You're able to survive through it. And then the aftermath is like ridiculous. And, I'm sure you felt that way, but like a lot of times I'm like, sometimes I just wish I didn't feel. Like I wish I could just like compartmentalize it. When you see all these other people, sometimes I envy them like that they're shut off, because I'm like, I want to shut off. There's no off button for me, and I wish there was. But
Right.
you have other plans for me.
Well, and that's like what I talked about. That's the other fight, flight, or fawn, right? And that's the shutdown, right? And none of them serve us, right? They all are still running a stress response in the body. It just looks different based upon the person and how we think we can survive and our personalities, right? And that's why it never looks one way. It's like I just got off a call with a client today, and we were talking about, and she's had severe anxiety, and she's like, man, I never thought that was connected to my anxiety, something personal I won't share, because if you were just to sit down, you would say, oh no, like that has nothing to do with anxious feelings. But that staying in her system,
Yeah.
the brain doesn't have to make sense to anybody. If it creates anxiety, or it creates pain, or it creates illness, or it creates depression, or it increases unworthiness, like that's whatever it decides that is very unique to you is the best way to protect you and to alert you that, hey, we still have this going on inside our system, right?
Well, and that's the part that I'm still even struggling with. Like it's really it's gut stuff. Like it's, all this, the stuff you're trying to work through it. And like literally I went and did yoga today, and I know the vagus nerve, and I'm trying to get it all figured out, but it's so much work. Like it's like you're just, it just is. But I also know that, listen, I don't want to take a pill, so I'm going to go work out. So if I have an hour to shut the people off upstairs, we're good. And that's usually what happens. I mean, it's true. I'll say somebody will come over, and I'm like, I have to go. I have an appointment with you to get my people to shut down. They're like, what? But it's what really, for me, it's my medicine, because then I can show up in the world and be kind and nice, because I've kind of calmed myself.
Well, and to that point, I obviously am a huge component of treating the body in every single way, through exercise, through nutrition, through proper supplementation. I mean, through even medical intervention and surgery. Sometimes like we have to, use all aspects when needed. But what I know is that the brain and nervous system, until we address them, until we address emotions stored in the body, then we're going to face an uphill battle, because that's not going to go away. And that's the command center of us, and that subconscious mind, which is storing all that trauma and all that data, that's influencing us. And so getting down to the depths of that and letting it go doesn't mean that we still won't be a human, because as we continue to live, we're going to have new experiences, we're going to have new relationships, we might have new stresses or in our body or in life that come up. Like, so nobody's ignorant of like, oh, and then everything is zen, because life will always have its things and our imperfect bodies. But the key is releasing and healing the past so that we can navigate the present with who we are now, with how we want to think now, versus the past always being projected onto the present and then amplifying everything we're experiencing now, because it's never just the thing, it's all the other past things with the thing. And so I know that's one thing, we've talked about, is just that sense of freedom, though, you have now we can't undo the past, right? You have a memory, a cellular memory of it, but the impact, the trauma, the emotional, the stories around your belief, those are what you've been able to let go of, right? And reframe to serve you now.
Yeah, and I think that, it's made me better with my clients too, because I know that like you always want to go to the trainer, right? That's already been through it. Like I heard how I found you was on Just Ingredients. She's one of our, we use all of her products. And I was listening to her podcast and I was like, oh my God. I mean, I loved it. So then that was when I found you, but I really believe, like if somebody, because you had walked through it, right? So I knew that you knew, because I heard a little bit of your story. So you don't go to the trainer that has a body that you don't want. You go to the trainer that has the body you want. So I know that now going through this, I can look into somebody's eyes and go, listen, there is a way. And I can truly actually share that and give them tips that I've learned through you and to send them to you, because that's what it's all about, is exactly what you're saying. It's the treating the person as a whole. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my clients don't like to hear that, because they're like, what do you mean I'm a product of my childhood? I'm like, well, let me just tell you a little story. And so I have, I usually will share a little bit of what I experienced so that they can kind of just see, it's a lot of moms. And the anxiety is so high. It's really unfortunate. The anxiety is high out here too, because listen, if I lived in Indiana and it was cold and I was, puckered up, it's just a different deal out here. Like, it's like Scottsdale's just different. Grateful again, but it's, there's a lot to uphold. You don't walk around in your sweats out here. And not to say that in a rude way, but you just don't. There's a lot of Judge Judys out here.
But
Judge Judys.
Well, and I think though, collectively as a world, no matter where you live, it feels that way now more just because of social media. And you can open up your phone and feel less than or compare at any time, right? Whereas even when I was growing up, it was like, you had to go get a magazine or you could watch a show, but you were mostly just exposed to your world, like around you, right? And now we're just exposed to the whole world every moment of every day, which is what I would say though, is it's human nature to compare, and it's human nature sometimes to do that. But when you have done the pieces to heal within yourself, the need to compare gets so much less. And if it ever does sneak in there, it's not that we all won't sometimes be like, oh yeah, okay. My daughter asked me the other day why I had so many freckles. And I was like, those are sunspots. And so it's not like I'm like, but I did tell her it's because mommy has lived,
Right.
But it's not, I'm not saying this elusiveness of where no one will ever not be like, oh yeah, I wish that was different, but it no longer holds the attachment to your worth or to your significance. And when you can detach that and detach it from your past, other people, your own body, anything else, then that can stay regardless of the seasons of life, or even if that comparison pops in, because nobody's ever going to be completely immune from that. But it no longer holds that significance and that weight, that it once did, especially if you had a belief and a story of not being wanted and accepted. And, you have to understand with the brain, it doesn't have to make sense, because when we're talking about that stress response, it's all in the emotional brain. So it's always emotional, which means it's not logical, right? So it doesn't have to make sense, even though it does, but in the way that it just encodes experiences in our life, right? And that's really what trauma is. Yes, there are actual traumatic experiences, but it also is just how the brain encodes an experience. And if it's altered by an experience, well, then that's a traumatic experience for your brain and nervous system, right? So, and we've talked about a lot that, because I think people sometimes only think it's from childhood, and this can be anything at any stage in your life that alters your brain. It's just that, unfortunately, childhood stuff is so significant because it's when your nervous system is learning how to operate. And so it's getting so deeply embedded because your brain is like, oh, this is who we are, and this is how we operate, and this is the world. And that's why childhood stuff can be so embedded deeply because that's how your brain learned. But any experience at any stage in our life can change the brain, right? We're changing the brain every single day, all the time. And to that point, we can do it anytime, no matter how long or stuck we have been in a certain pattern or belief system. My oldest client right now is 83. Right? I love it because she's like, I don't care. I want to live the rest of my life different. And I'm like, yes, right? Isn't that amazing? I mean,
That's awesome.
she'd love to go back and have the last, 60 years, but I love that she is embodying to live differently, whatever she has left.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the point with what I know many people feel like you, and they've done so many things, but to not, give up and to know that there's a way to really get your system to release some of the stuff that you haven't been able to get away from. You have awareness around, but you can't get free of. And I want to give kudos to you because this bioemotional healing and the process only works if you do the work, right?
It was the hardest thing I ever, but it worked. It wasn't that hard. Yes, it was hard.
No, and I'm gonna I know that, and I'm gonna reframe it, right? Because it is true, and I'm not saying it doesn't take effort, but it's everything that the brain has to do something different takes a lot from the brain, right? A lot from the brain to change. But if we really sit in it, it was taking so much effort and was so hard to keep fighting that stress response. But what it is we adapt to it. And so it feels easier than changing. But if we're really honest with ourselves, fighting that every day is so hard.
Too much effort.
And so that's what we were talking about. Let's put that effort from fighting every day to actually really finally healing and getting free of it, right? It's just that the brain is like, this is all new, so it's so hard because it's taxing to the brain to do something new, right? But kudos to you because you did it, and you're now you get to be on the other side of it and continue it. Like I said, as we live life, we're always having to process and reframe and sit with ourselves. That's just a way of being, but it's what allows us to be free in our life versus constantly being reactive to life.
Oh, for sure. Like it's funny. I went boxing just real quick. I used to box all the time when I had a lot of, stuff in me. And so then I went box last week and he's like, this isn't the Ivanhoe I know. I go, listen, I've worked really hard. I don't need to hurt my body to box. He's like, what? Because I was so, anxious. I would go and I would beat the crap out of the bag. Like you could hear it through the gym. And now he's like, this isn't the Ivanhoe I know. And I'm like, this is a new Ivanhoe.
That's right. And claiming that identity. And I always tell my clients to do that because people, it's like surprising, right? To really see a whole shift in how someone lives and operates. And it's great because it's a gift to anyone that you now interact with, because then they maybe start thinking that's possible versus what we've collectively said a million times, like people don't change. Change is hard. This is just who I am. This is who my family is. Like, this is what we do, right? Versus, okay, but do I want to keep doing that? Do I want to keep living this way? I can do something about it, but it can be hard to find the how to do that. And I'm just so grateful that our lives connected, and now you get to serve your clients. You work in the help field and help them, and you do hair analysis, right?
Yeah.
You do this. At the end of the day, my brain was like, what's that word? Hair analysis. But it's incredible because yes, you can't go through any physical stress without emotional stress. And either way, there usually tends to be breakdown in the body ultimately when there's also internal stress happening, right? And I'm not saying all that is caused, because it's not. Like, obviously I've lived through it, and I didn't cause my virus as an illness, and I didn't cause the failed surgery, but I had to sit with that. It wasn't just that creating the reaction. What else was creating stress in my system?
Well, that was
right.
That was the main reason why I even brought it online or on board with for our clients is because I had been to all these doctors and they said I had a leaky gut. And I went and had a hair test and I had a parasite. I was feeding that little bugger. So then I did a parasite cleanse and it was over. And then I was like, wait, we have to offer this. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, just like, with the virus, you don't even know.
Right.
So, that was really, and I'm just grateful for the whole, honestly, I tell people about you all the time. And I do want to share this. Like, I always talk about how if there's something they could do before they even get out of bed is, shifting what you want. And that's been a game changer for me. That really has almost kind of magic. Like, it's interesting. Like, I'm like, just try it. It's magic. I promise. And they look like I'm crazy in 10 heads, but I don't have clients that don't know me, that don't think I have come up with crazy stuff, because I do, because it works anyways. But still, and it really is such a game changer, because you really, knowing the science about your brain changing when you say positive things, it doesn't know the difference. It was really a game changer for me, because like most people, we're just ready to go off and our to-do list, which is endless, and we're already in stress mode. And I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
Stop that.
That's right. There's enough stress in life. It's and I know it's a beautiful thing to access that stress response when needed.
Yes.
But then come out of it too. And because like the fight or flight response is crucial to our survival. And there are times we absolutely need it. And you needed it as a child. I needed it as I navigated through my illness as a teenager. And again, but we don't want to live there. And the sad thing is mass majority are living there 24/7. And that's why we're seeing such a huge prevalence and breakdown in our mental and emotional health and in our physical health, even though we have so many resources and than we ever have had, right? Because that stress has to manifest somewhere. Yeah. And it ultimately, again, is individual where that shows up the most, but it has to show up. And I just want people to know that that can change. And you're not the exception to that, because what I do is based in neuroscience, which means unless you have true mental illness, like to psychosis, where I've had people come and I'm like, if you're not conscious, right, I can't help yet. Or you have like dementia or brain injury, otherwise the functionalities of the brain are the same for each of us, which means nobody's the exception to being able to change their life if they're willing to put in the effort.
Right.
So,
and that's a better way.
Yes. Then life gets easier instead of harder to keep fighting. Yeah. So Christina, it was, again, kudos to you for showing up and taking the leap, especially after already doing so much, because I know that becomes a barrier in of itself, right? To believing there's still something out there that actually could work. And just, again, like I always say, like the greatest joy is now my clients going out and serving their purpose and serving their clients or their community or what they want to do, because we need more of that in the world. And so I just want to thank you. You're just amazing to work with. You're still part of my family, as we always will be. Yes. And I'm just so grateful. And thank you for, coming on and sharing this with others.
For having me. And I'm really grateful for you. You're really doing amazing things.
Wow. Thank you. It's my absolute honor. I get to work with amazing people like you all the time. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Christina. And see you another time. Okay. Bye.